V'shem Eloheinu nidayim aliyad l'kol mashalei sechon. Ata yodaiti ki hishia Adonai Yeshika yanehu mishmekotche b'gvoras yesheminei. Ele rechav ele susu v'nachu v'shem Adonai Eloheinu nazkirhim akaru v'nafalu. V'anachnu kamelu v'niseidan Adonai Yeshia melech anenu v'yim karenu. Please Shem answer us on the day that we call to you. We're calling to you now. Tanya, we're in the middle of chapter 13, page 198. We're talking about the war between the Nefesh Elokis and the Nefesh Bahamas, Nefesh Taviz. And he turns to a Torah scholar. I said a blessing downstairs. What about if you have a person, excuse me, his focus and desire, his love is to learn Torah. He loves learning Torah. And he doesn't waste any time. He learns Torah by day, by night, whenever he has a spare moment. This is not a proof that the evil has been banished from his heart, that he's conquered his heart. Could be he hasn't. It could be that the Yetzer Hara is still as strong as ever, maybe even stronger. And it remains in its place in the left side of his heart, just as strong as when he was young. In the left side of his heart. How can this be? If we're saying the antidote to the Yetzer Hara is to learn Torah and do mitzvahs, and here's a person who's doing nothing else, that's his whole goal in life, his whole occupation, and we're saying the Yetzer Hara is still strong. Why? How could that be? And that is because we're not in control. To say, okay, from now on, I'm not going to have a Yetzer Hara. That's not up to us. What is up to us? It's up to us how we will behave. The garments of the soul are what we do and what we think and what we say. Those things we can control. But the thoughts that pop into your head or the inclinations that you have for good or for not, the opposite of good, that's not in our control. So what he's saying here is that the Yetzer Hara could still be in full strength, but 1, 2, 3, 4th paragraph, Rak, page 198, 4th paragraph, Rak, Shaluvushav, but the garments of the soul, Shem Machshava Dibur Ma'isa, which are what you think and what you say and what you do, of the Nefesh Bahamas, from the godly soul, they're all good. But from the animal soul, they're selfish. Einan mislabshim v'moyach. However, the desires of the animal soul do not have control over the person to make him think what the Nefesh Bahamas wants him to think or say or do. Einan mislabshim v'moyach v'peh. They do not succeed to enclose themselves in the person's thoughts or the person's speech. V'hayadayim, or a person's actions in his hands, v'shar evri haguf, or any other limbs of his body. V'pnei Hashem shanasan shlita u'mimshala l'moyach al harev al alev, because Hashem is there, like we said before, at the right hand of the person, shining on his godly soul, giving him the strength to withstand the assault, the attacks, the constant attacks of the animal soul. Shiyu lavush umerkava l'shleisha levushel, so that the body will become a garment for the expression of the godly soul, and for the three garments of the godly soul. Shislab shubehem. We're moving up to the next page now, 199. Shehem machshava dibru u'maisa shel Torah and mitzvahs Torah, which is Torah and mitzvahs, all the details and aspects thereof. Moving on. Ava mahusas musa shall nefesh elokis, but the essence of the godly soul, amahusa vasmusa shall nefesh bahamis, ein la shlitu memshala. It does not have control or mastery of the animal soul. It may want to control all the elements of thought, speech, and deed, but it doesn't have the power. That's a God-given gift. It's not something we can control. Ki im, except b'sha she'ahavas Hashem hu b'his galus libay, except at moments after you have a terrific Tanya share, or you're learning with a Chavrusa, or you behold with your eyes the awesome magnificence of Hashem's creation, and your heart is inflamed with the awareness of God, who is giving life to every single thing in the world. And when you see this, you think, this is awesome. This is awesome. And when you remember what we learned in the Tanya, that by knowing himself, Hashem knows everything, because he's the source of life of everything, and he's bringing everything into life every single second. So whatever you see, whatever you look at, you're looking at Hashem. If you go to the Alter Rebbe brings the example, if you go to a palace and you behold there the king, do you see the king? No, you see his robes, you see all the noble people, the high-ranking officials who surround him. You see the beautiful architecture of the palace. You see all the servants scurrying here and there, carrying out the wishes of their master. But you don't really see the king. You understand from all this that the king must be very great to have all this around him. He must be very powerful and very great. So when we look at the world and we see the greatness of the creation, we're seeing the greatness of Hashem, who could create all of this and is creating it every single second out of nothing. So then a person feels not just awe, but also love for Hashem. So at these times when his love for Hashem is flaming in his heart, at certain times like this, a person feels inspired, as, and especially you might feel this inspiration at the time of davening, or whenever you feel it. Even at these moments, it doesn't mean that he has transformed the Yetzer Hara or changed it. Just at this moment, his love of Hashem is so strong, the Yetzer Hara doesn't have an influence on him. But when his inspiration dies down, what happens? The bad guy comes charging back. You thought you knocked him out. He's not knocked out. Page 200. All this is prophesied in the story of Rivka when she married Yitzchak, and she was very young when they got married. She was only 3 years old. So for the first 10 years, it wasn't possible to have children. After 10 years, they began trying to have children, and they didn't succeed. Another 10 years went by. And so they both prayed very strongly together in opposite sides. They went up on the roof and they stood on opposite sides. It's interesting. One time, we gave in a cover for the magazine to the Rebbe. We just had a young man, a boy, in the cover. And the Rebbe said, you have to have a girl on the opposite, in the opposite corner. It's reminiscent of this scene where you have Yitzchak in one corner of the roof and Rivka in the other, and they're both praying that they should merit to have children. And she becomes pregnant. She starts having terrible pain, terrible pains. She's in agony. She doesn't know what to do. What does she do? She doesn't take one of these sound tests to know what's the gender of the baby she's carrying. She goes to the Rebbe. She goes to the Rebbe. The Rebbe is Shem. Shem is the son of Noach. And she asks him, what's going on? He says, famous prophecy. You have 2 nations in your womb. And they're very opposite from one another. And they are already struggling with one another for control and for supremacy. When one is up, the other will be down. And when the roles change, then the other one will be up and the first one will be down. Until Moshiach comes, he doesn't say this, but until Moshiach comes, there's not going to be peace between them. And true enough, she has 2 children, Esav and Yaakov. Esav comes out first, but Yaakov is holding on to his heel. So the word for heel is akev, a heel. So therefore he's called Yud Akev, Yaakov. Esav comes out first. He's covered with hair like a hairy animal. He's all red. It says Yaakov is a simple person, meaning he's not a hairy person. Very smooth. And the prophet says he is going to dwell in tents. He's going to sit and learn Torah. And Esav is going to be a man of the fields. Allegorically, page 200 at the top. They represent the war between good and evil in a person's heart. And this is what the prophet Shem says to her, one nation will prevail over the other. The explanation here, Yaakov stands for that which is good and godly. And when he prevails over Esav, he can prevail over the evil, but he does not conquer him, never conquers him. When this one goes up, the other one goes down. And the vice versa, when Esav and his descendants have supremacy, then Yaakov falls under them. And this is the struggle between Israel and epitomized in Esav, epitomized in Rome. Rome is made up of the descendants of Esav, Edom. He is called Edom, which means red, because of what happened on the day of Abraham's funeral, his Levaya, when Abraham passed away. He passed away 5 years before his time. His time was supposed to live 180 years. At 175, he passes away. There's a tradition that when a person passes away, you make for them a special meal when they come home. What do we eat at the meal? Anybody know? Ever saw this tradition? Eggs and lentils, because they have no mouth. Because a person, after a funeral, like we read last week, Pasha Shmini, when the sons of Aaron died on the day of the inauguration of the tabernacle, the temple of God, it says Aaron didn't say anything. Because mourning, grief, does not have a mouth to speak. So when you go to the house of a mourner, you wait for them to say something to you. If they don't say anything to you, just sit quietly. Maybe they don't want to talk. So Yaakov is preparing a bowl, a porridge of lentils, because lentils are small beans, closed, which is the traditional food that you give to a mourner. He's doing it for his grandfather. Esav, on this day, this is the day of their bar mitzvah, I think. Esav was out having a good time. He did a number of terrible transgressions, even according to the laws of the universal laws of mankind. What did they include? He raped a young woman on the day of her wedding. He killed Nimrod, who was a king, who had persecuted Abraham, and he stole from him his garment, which was a garment that had been worn by Adam, by the first man, Adam Arishon, and had all kinds of images of different animals on it that had power over them. So he became a great hunter. The animals were powerless for anybody who had this garment on. He came in, he was exhausted from his adventures. And he saw that Yaakov was preparing food. He says, give me some of this food, I'm going to die. He said, I'm not preparing it for you, I'm preparing it for Zayda. He says, I must have it. So Yaakov sees that what's really in contention between them is who's the elder son. The elder son is going to be the priest of God. And Yaakov sees that this person, his twin brother, is in denial of the authority of the laws of Hashem, which are the 7 laws of Noach. So you're not fit. You are not fit to be the high priest. Sell me the right to be the firstborn. He says, I'll sell you whatever you want. I'll sell you the Brooklyn Bridge. Just give me the food. Pour it down my throat. I'm going to die. And so this is another thing that Esau did on this awesome day in the history of mankind. He denied his right to be the firstborn. He says, I don't need it. I don't want it. I don't need it. Actually, he said, what's in it? So Yaakov, who was the scholar, had been studying the Talmud, as they knew it in those days, which was very, very, very much larger than the Talmud that we know it, because idol worship was prevalent. So the tractates about idol worship were very, very long. And he'd been studying it. And so he knew, he asked him, what's the first birthright all about? He says, you're going to have to serve in the temple. And it's very exacting. Everything has an exact measure how it has to be done and when it has to be done and where it has to be done. And he says, and what if you don't? He says, if you don't, you don't survive. As we saw in last week's Parsha, where the 2 elder sons of Aaron brought an incense offering into the Holy of Holies that should be burned to create it was the most sublime of all the offerings, because there's no ashes, there's nothing left, just the powder goes up in smoke. And they brought this into the Holy of Holies in an ecstasy of love for God on the day that Hashem revealed himself to the Jewish people. And so a fire had come down to accept the offerings that Aaron had brought earlier in the day. And now the pasuk says exactly the same words. A fire came out from heaven and went in their nostrils, and their souls went out, and their clothes were not burned, but their souls were burned, and they went out. And this is what Yaakov tells them. He tells them there's a lot of death penalties involved. He says, I'm going to die, says Esau. So it has a double meaning, not just that he's starving. It means if I have this, if this is what the birthright entails, I'll never survive. You can have it. And he sells it. That was considered a grave sin. And then later in life, when Yitzchak was 127 years old, he feels that it's time that he has to settle his affairs about who's going to get the blessings. And he sends out Esau to bring some venison, which he loves to eat. Go hunt me some venison and make me delicacies like I love. And Rivka hears him giving this order and says to Yaakov, I'm going to make the delicacies that your father loves. You take it to him. He says, but my father, he's going to know there's a trick. He's going to curse me and not bless me. She says, on me be the curse. Famous words. If there's a curse, let the curse be on me. She owned, as part of her kasuba, part of her marriage contract with Yitzchak, was every day he had to give her 2 goats. And with these goats, she would prepare him food. So she took 2 goats and she prepared them, shechted them, salted them, prepared them. All this must have taken some time. And she prepared the food the way he loves it. And she took the skins. And what she did with the skins, she put them on his arms, on his neck. And she sent Yaakov in and says, now go get the blessings. He's trembling. He goes in and he says, Yitzchak says, who is it? Yaakov says, it is I. Esau is your firstborn. He says, how'd you get here? How'd you get here so quickly? He said, Hashem speeded my way. Yaakov says, what? When was the last time you used Hashem's name? Yitzchak. He sees something's funny here. He says, come over here. Let me feel you. Comes over and he feels his neck and he feels his arms, and they're hairy like a goat. Like a goat's hair. He says, I don't understand it. This is Yitzchak, a very famous line. The hands are the hands of Esau, but the voice is the voice of Yaakov. Yaakov says, come, father, please have something to eat. Again, Esau doesn't talk like that. But there's a giveaway. What's the giveaway? When Yaakov enters, Yitzchak smells the smell of Gan Eden. He smells Gan Eden. How did he know what Gan Eden smells like? And the answer is because when Abraham took Yitzchak to offer him up as an offering, and he's there tied up, hand and foot, on the altar with the fire blazing, ready to ignite the wood. And Abraham goes over him with the knife, he's ready to slit his throat. You know, like they like to do in the Middle East. And the angel grabs his hand, so to speak, if you can imagine that, and stops him. And he says, Avram, Avram! The angels are crying, the angels are weeping. The violins are playing. It's high drama. What? It says the tears from the angels fell into Yitzchak's eyes. And that's why he went blind later in life. because another, 67 years would go by till this happened, till he reached the age of 180. And at that moment, when the knife was poised on Yitzchak's neck, the angel stopped Abraham from doing anything, and Yitzchak's soul flew out. Like, I guess he fainted. Where did it go? Went to Gan Eden. And he remained in Gan Eden for the next 3 years. In the meantime, Rivka had to be born, and she had to grow to the age of 3 years when she could get married. 3-year-old girl has a mind of her own. She can say, yes, I want to get married. And so he married her when she was 3. And that's how he knew later, when Yaakov came in to get the brachas, he recognized the smell of Gan Eden because he'd been there. He had been there. He said, the smell of my son is like the fragrance of Gan Eden, which is a reference to the Torah that he learned all the time. But that's how he knew what Gan Eden was all about. And he gives Yaakov the blessings. Now he's convinced that this Yaakov is his firstborn. He thinks it's Esau, and he blesses him with the most beautiful blessings. We recite them every Saturday night after Shabbos is over. And as Yaakov goes out, Esau comes in. Seconds apart. And when Yitzchak discovers what's happening, and Esau understands that he's been beaten, that Yaakov beat him to the punch, he cries out, what is this? He did it again? This is the second time he's fooled me? What's the second time? When was the first time? The first time was with the lentils, when he sold the birthright. And when the whole story comes out, and he tells Yitzchak that this is the second time, and because he sold the birthright so and so many years earlier, so then Yitzchak was reassured that he had done the right thing. And then with knowledge of forethought, he blesses Yaakov again. He ratifies the blessings to Yaakov, and Yitzchak cries, and Esau cries out, he says, Tata, have you no blessings left for me? And Yitzchak says, how can I bless you when I blessed him to be a master over you? Whatever a servant possesses belongs to the master. But then he does give him a blessing by, you're going to live by the sword. You will live by the sword. And this is, from him comes the warrior nation of Rome, and he's called Edom. He's the father of the nation called Edom. Edom means red because the lentils are red. He's named after the lentils, the Edomites. And it's my hunch and my kishkas tell me that this is where all the kings of Europe come from. Where do these families, the royal families of France and England and Russia, the Habsburgs and the Kaisers of Germany, they all intermarry. Where do they all come from? Why do they all have this tremendous power? And I think the reason is because they all come from Esau. But I never saw that really, but it's probably written in holy books. seems to make sense. But what do I know? Like Rabbi Gordon says, what do I know? Just a kid from New Jersey. Okay, so this is what it says here on page 200. When this one rises and prevails, the other one will fall, and vice versa. In other words, when Esav is up, Yisrael is down. What means up? What means down? When the Jewish people go in the ways of Torah and mitzvahs with their whole heart, Esav does not have power over them. But when we get lackadaisical, and we start to take things for granted, and we start to indulge in pleasures, self-centered pleasures, and we listen to the Yetzer Hara and not the Yetzer Tov, then all of a sudden there's a backlash. And when skeptics say, do you think a Moshiach's ever going to come? Do you think that God really is with the Jewish people? Then that opens the door to the descendants of Esav to come and say, ha ha, you've just been kidding yourself all along. And the terrible things begin to happen. The Yetzer Hara gets his foot in the door. Page 200 at the bottom. Shenefesh elakis misametzes, when the godly soul strengthens itself, miskaberes al nefesh habahamis, and it overpowers the animal soul, v'mokar hagvurais, with tremendous strength. And what's the source of strength? What's the source of gevura? You know, if you picture the diagram that they make of the 10 sephiros. So you have Chachma. I'm going to do it inverted. Chachma is on the right, which is my left, but it's your right, right? Bina is here on the left, right? Wisdom, development, understanding. So understanding breaks things down into its pieces. Chachma is a light, shining light. Chachma leads to chesed. And Bina leads to gevura. So they image one another. So we have chesed and gevura. So that when the Jewish people follow in the ways of Torah and mitzvahs with all your heart and all your soul and all your might, they draw upon themselves strength from Bina into the midah of gevura, which is strength. Page 201. And so the divine soul in his bainin, when a person meditates also with this strength, what does he do? He meditates on the greatness of Hashem, Ein Sof Baruch Hu, the infinite blessed one, blessed be he, the Harli Ahava Aza La Hashem, and this leads to the meditation on the greatness of Hashem, like we learned in chapter 3, leads to a feeling of love, burning love in the heart, in the right side of the heart, which is the chesed. This is a fire, even though fire is connected with gevura, but this is a fiery love of Hashem. As then, continuing second paragraph 201, is kafia sitra achra, the negativity of the Yetzer Hara is subdued, Shabahola Smoli, in the left side of the heart, and it takes a hike. Avolenis batel, but it's not overwhelmed. It's not vanquished. It's not transformed. It doesn't become a Yetzer Tov. Like the pawn in the game of chess does not becomes a queen. In this description, spiritual description, the Yetzer Hara does not become a Yetzer Tov. When does it become a Yetzer Tov? The Yetzer Hara becomes a Yetzer Tov when Hashem says, okay. It's a gift from Hashem. It's not something we can command. And I'm by dint of my hard work, I'm going to get there. No matter how determined we are, we can't make it happen. All we can do is dominate and the Yetzer Hara, and with discipline, self-discipline, not listen to its urgings. Because in a tzaddik, he does succeed in making the Yetzer Hara into a Yetzer Tov, but we're talking here, this is the book of the Beinani. And the Beinani does not succeed in doing that. And that's why he's a Beinani. So he ends up like a Rasha, but he never is a Rasha. He doesn't behave like a Rasha because of his self-discipline. He doesn't allow himself to behave like a Rasha, but he's constantly struggling to hold that level. Ela b'tzadik, concerning a tzaddik, it says, that he has chased the Yetzer Hara out completely, never to come back again. Thank you very much for today. We'll continue tomorrow. Be'ezus Hashem.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for joining.
Thanks to you.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam. Enjoy the beautiful spring weather. While it lasts. Iyar stands for the letters Iyar. Aleph, Yud, Resh stands for Ani Hashem Refecha. The words that come right after the giving of the Ten Commandments. And then I am Hashem who heals you. Iyar spelled with two Yuds stands for Abraham, Yitzchak, Yaakov, and Rachel. Four wheels of the chapter.